Every description of God that I've heard holds God to be all-powerful, very typical, and all good. And I see earthquakes and tornadoes and disease, childhood leukemia, and I see all of this and I say, I do not see evidence of both of those being true simultaneously. If there is a God, the God is either not all-powerful or not all good.
Yep, there is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Always thought-provoking. Love what he has to say on our intro. G'day and welcome to episode 18 of this podcast. We are running a little bit late just for something different. Technology and us don't often see eye to eye. It's an atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into a bar, episode 18, live right now on YouTube and Facebook. G'day, I'm your host, Peter Rowe. If you're watching on either Facebook or YouTube on this Wednesday, the 24th of April, 2024, welcome. Great to have you with us tonight. Just gone 8 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time. As always, looking forward to hearing from you with your comments and or questions. We had a heap last week. We did our first dump of a caller that was just getting just a little bit carried away. That's okay. We'll see how we go tonight. What you say matters, so please feel free to join in. So earlier today, I was driving through an area here in Perth called Northridge, and I noticed a family of three walking on the footpath. For those of you who are in the States and other places around the world and don't know what a footpath is, it's what's commonly known as a sidewalk in the States. So we call it a footpath here. So as long as we know what we're talking about, you might be thinking, what the hell's a footpath? The family stood out to me because the man was wearing black shorts and a T-shirt. The woman, who I assume was his wife, wore a full burqa, which is the whole body covered with just the face uncovered. And the little girl who was with them, around about 5 or 6, was dressed the same as the mother. Now, what struck me, and this is obviously not an uncommon sight anywhere in the world, but what struck me was that the man was pretty much dressed like a normal Aussie bloke with the shorts and the T-shirt. But the females wore traditional garments, and it got me thinking about the various rules we choose to live by depending on each different religion around the world. Judaism is another great example for some of the rules that to lay people seem quite extreme. For instance, did you know that some Orthodox Jews have 2 kitchens in their house, the sort of wealthy ones, 2 sets of pots and pans, or instead of 2 kitchens, may have at least 2 ovens. Why? Rules and laws. That's why Shabbat is the Jewish day of rest. The Shabbat happens each week from sunset on Friday to sunset on Saturday. During Shabbat, Jewish people remember the story of creation from the Torah, where God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th day. Different Jewish people celebrate Shabbat in different ways. There's a Jewish law that you can't cook milk and meat together. Traditionally, this also extends to everything used in the cooking process. So many Jews have separate dishes and pots and pans for food that contain dairy and food that contains meat, so they don't mix. It's possible to use the same oven for both, but you have to make sure that there's no remnants left in the either oven. So they have to be incredibly clean. But if you have a big kitchen, you can be simpler by simply having 2 ovens, and then you get to make chicken and cake at the same time, if that's what you want. Now, many electric devices may not be used on Shabbat for reasons unrelated to electricity. For example, an electric stove may not be used to cook food, since all cooking of food is forbidden. An electric lawnmower may not be used, since cutting grass by any means is also forbidden. I didn't know that. Use of a computer may violate the prohibition of writing, either in displaying words on your screen or saving information to disk. This is amazing, but it is absolutely true. It does seem crazy to me. I mean, what would be the consequences of not obeying those Jewish laws? I understand laws and rules governing religion, and in my case, it was Christianity. For a very long time, my family never ate meat at Easter. A lot of people who aren't necessarily Christians or believers do that anyway. Good Friday is a particularly significant day for Catholics, for example. Fasting and abstinence of meat for meat are mandatory. This means Catholics over the age of 14 should only eat 1 full meal and 2 smaller meals that do not equal a full meal and avoid meat altogether. Fish is often a suitable substitute, as it was for us in other seafood. It took us quite a while getting out of that habit after we left the church, but we did. Now it just seems perfectly normal and quite absurd that we would not eat meat whenever we wanted to. And the Old Testament was full of do nots, lest you offend God. I'll name a couple because there's some crazy ones in here. Now, this one I agree with. I'm sure Jason, who's standing by, will too. Don't burn your children in a sacrificial fire to Molech. I get that. You're not going to get an argument from me. Not to attempt contacting the dead or mediums or wizards. No sorcery as well. And do not cut your hair at the temples or shave your beard. Based on that alone, Jason and I are both in serious trouble. Men must not wear women's clothes and women must not wear men's clothes. No tattoos. Again, I'm in trouble. Bless God after meals. To circumcise every male on the 8th day, not on the 7th or the 6th, has to be the 8th day, and to rest on the 7th day, stay near home and within city bounds on the Sabbath. Amazing. And there's plenty in the New Testament as well, but we won't go into that right now because it'll take us all night. Now, I'm here to hear what my two co-hosts have to say about this. Suresh and Richard are not with us tonight, but radio host and AI buff Jason Jordan is. G'day, Jace.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, mate. Good to have you with us again. Bible teacher, dog owner, and stressed out dad is with us at the moment in spirit because he is looking after the 4 million kids he's got. He's got a sick wife and a sick puppy as well, so he will be with us shortly. In the meantime, we will move on. I haven't even scratched the surface of rules that people choose to live by simply because they believe that their God says so. For me, I find far too many people have lost their freedom to be who they are just because they think that obedience to God is the most important thing in their life. I was going to go to Luke, but as I mentioned, he is busy. He'll be back in about 10 minutes. So, Jace, what is your experience, if any, about the amount of crazy rules that just seem quite absurd to normal people?
Normal people.
Yeah.
Look, the first thing I thought, as you were talking about, for example, the Jews and the multiplicity of ovens that they've got, is that if they can't be having meat and dairy products in the same place, they're foregoing one of the best treats in the world, the old beef milkshake. I mean, how can they do without that, Pete? How can they do without a beef milkshake?
I don't know. I'm stunned. I'm stunned, Jace.
But I will go on to say, fish. Now, what are fish made of if they're not made of meat?
Yeah, that's always been an interesting one for me too. How it separates them. Yeah, it's flesh, isn't it?
Just
Sure.
looks white. You know, is that the difference?
Well, no. I mean,
there's lots of color.
There's lots of fish that's red meat and brown meat and all.
True.
I don't know. I've often wondered that. Yeah, and a lot of people are pescatarian, so fish and seafood is all good because I don't eat meat. Yeah, you do. I don't know.
Look, I'm married to a Catholic girl, and the family practices traditional Catholic things at Easter time. And in actual fact, it's become something that I quite looked forward to. So on the Friday, there would be no meat, but there would be a wonderful Polish mushroom soup, which I absolutely adore. And mushroom really is effectively a meat substitute.
Yes, that's right. Where's the Polish come from?
Well, she's Polish, and I guess they're
I see.
They're Roman Catholics.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. So does she have an orthodoxy about her? Is she very much involved in the traditional Roman Catholic Church,
No,
or is
not
she
really.
just one
She's
of
a bit of a fallen or a lapsed Catholic. Look, her family is perhaps a little more that way inclined, but Trish certainly isn't. Although that said, she did have the kids baptized. That wasn't something that I really wanted to be involved with, just because I see it as a little bit of a charade. And it would be very hypocritical of me to be involved in something like that. So I wasn't going to put my foot down and say, no, you can't do that. I mean, ultimately, people should have the freedoms to do what they want to do and practice what they believe in.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Along with not eating meat at Easter, the baptism. It seems that no matter who you are, no matter what your background, no matter how little you actually are involved in the church. You might go maybe 2 or 3 times a year on special occasions, one being Christmas and Easter and stuff like that. But when it comes to baptizing children, I don't understand the point. The children don't know they're going to be baptized. They don't care. It's not about them. It's for some reason the parents feel obsessed. And I'm not judging people because it's happened in our family as well. It's just seems to be we must do it. And even if you talk to them and say, why are you doing it? Are you believers? No, we just feel we need to baptize the children. At that point, there's not a conversation that generally goes on after that. If you actually drill down and say, what to you is baptism? What does it actually mean? What do you think is going to happen to your children if you do it? What's going to happen to your children if you don't do it? Are you doing it purely because someone told you to and someone at the front said it's a great thing you should do, and it's just the way we do it? It's one of those things that everyone seems to just want to partake in.
It's a fail-safe, isn't it? That you do it just in
Yeah.
case. Just in case.
Yeah.
And I mean, I obviously don't subscribe to that kind of thing, but Pete, we talk about the freedom to practice your religion, but I think what goes hand in hand with that is not just freedom of religion, but freedom from religion. And I think we've got just as much right to not be swamped with people's religious beliefs, and they have just as much right not to be persecuted by those of us who don't believe. Those freedoms,
Absolutely, yeah.
that's part of a democratic society.
Yep. And I think the frustration and difficulty with people trying to understand what's going on is that the church also plays along with it. They say that that's what we want you to do. Oh, we're not believers. It's okay. We can talk about that. We can work our way through this, as if there's sort of, you get $100 for every baptism that comes in through the door. There's some sort of sense that there's a reward for the obedience of something that most people who do it simply don't understand what it is. Now, for an evangelical Pentecostal Christian that I used to be, baptism was something very different. It was the full body immersion. Often a lot of the churches have a pool underneath the stage at the front. If you ever see a pastor disappear and water coming up, that's what's happened. It's gone through the floor. It's been eaten away by termites, and he's ended up in the pool. But that for me was an incredible moment as a true believer. It was amazing. It was not just jumping in a pool. There was something about the ceremony that made you feel something had happened. Something had been.
There's a little bit of a difference between what I see as being the rules of some religion that are based around, for example, living in the Middle East 2,000 years ago, versus a lot of the rules that are in place today for evangelicals and those that believe in the wealth manifesto and all that kind of thing. Those rules of many, many years ago that said things like, don't eat pork, or, don't mix the two different types of foods. And all of those actually had a basis in teaching people how to live a hygienic life.
Yes.
Prior to schools and television and newspapers and books and the education system, those lessons, those rules really were in place to help people survive that much longer and be a little bit healthier while they're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's extraordinary if you read the Old Testament and have a look, in particularly Ezekiel, Exodus, Deuteronomy, and a couple of other. It's a litany of what you can't do. How many different materials are in your clothing? You can't wear them. It can only be one. And look, you understand. Everyone says, "Oh, it's the Old Testament. Don't worry about it." But there are people today who still abide by that. There are women who have their hair covered in church, and they're not allowed to talk in church because they're women.
They're cherry picking because there's all these rules, but they only choose which ones they're going to follow. They've got tattoos. Well, I'm going to ignore that one. Two different types of clothes, materials. Yeah, I'm going to ignore that one. You shouldn't sleep with your neighbor's wife. Well, borderline. I'm okay with that one.
I probably didn't need to be told that. I think I could probably. That's like the 10 Commandments. I mean, really, if you have to be told that you're not allowed to do all the things in the 10 Commandments, you really, I mean, wow. It should be something that we, automatic, and most of us do. Most of us understand that. But there are so many, as you say, cherry picking. There are so many parts of the Old Testament. And what actually surprised me today, which may not interest you necessarily, but if you're listening and you have a deep faith in God and Jesus and Christianity, there's a lot of New Testament which is sort of carried over or spilled over, if you like, from the Old Testament that is still there, particularly about women, about talking in church and having your hair covered up and stuff like that. It's not just the New Testament came along and the Old Testament. Well, that's it's done. Just don't refer to this anymore. We're not doing that. We didn't like that God. He was nasty. We're going for the new one. We're going for the new hip Jesus. But there are still so many people who still live by rules, and I don't know why, and I really want to find out why, and particularly the control that people have over each other in the Jewish community. And I'm not picking on Jews. Most Jews I've ever met have been lovely people. They're great when you debate them. They're beautiful in their belief, in the sense that they're what they actually think is real and true. They're quite lovely. They're not like aggressive Christians at
But
all.
there is a vast difference, isn't there, between your ordinary sort of run-of-the-mill Jew and, say, an Orthodox Jew, like the ones that you see on television who live in New York and they wear the black and they've got the sideburn tassels. And
Yeah.
I mean, that really is a pretty extreme form of not just religion, but culture and way of life and the policing that they do of each other. It scares me so much that there are people that will take things to that extreme.
It's extraordinary. We where we live here in Perth, we're very close to a huge community of Jewish people in I don't know if it's in Nolamara or Dianella, around there, but you see them walking on a Sunday because that's all there is to do. You're not allowed to watch TV, you're not allowed to play on the computer, you're not even allowed to switch your light switch on in your house or off. And so they're walking around, and I'm dying to sit and talk with them, just say, look, I understand why, but really why? What do you feel is happening when you're doing this? Do you have a sense that God is watching and ticking boxes and going, yes, that's what I want you to do? I find it extraordinary that any understanding of the Old Testament would somehow make sense that this is what you should be doing.
So forgive my ignorance here, Pete. The Ten Commandments, are they an Old Testament thing or a New Testament thing?
Old Testament thing, yes.
So
Jesus came to us the new covenant.
The Old Testament behind. Does that mean we've left the Ten Commandments behind?
Look, this is an interesting question. I was actually reading about this the other day. There are people who say yes, and Luke's probably the best one from a biblical perspective to answer this one when he comes and joins us. But no, certainly for the most part, the Old Testament stays where it was, as it were, and the New Testament is very different. And there are no 10 commandments, as it were, but people still at liberty to refer back to them if they've forgotten that you're not allowed to do what it says you're not allowed to do. I forgot about that. Sorry, I'm just going to the next door neighbor. So forgot about that bit. So yeah, look, it's extraordinary. And of course, for those people who don't know anything about Judaism, I mean, it's Old Testament based. I mean, they don't believe that Jesus has arrived yet, so the New Testament is irrelevant and not applicable to their
it's a prophecy,
to their belief.
Isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
So
yeah,
well, I guess this brings me to another thing about rules. Then, so when we talk about the Sabbath, now is that the Saturday or the Sunday?
Sunday.
So why is it that so many calendars now mark Sunday as the beginning of the week?
Oh, look, it's probably just a modern adaptation to fit in with those people who are heathens and work on a Sunday when you're not allowed to do that either.
But don't the Jews actually see the Saturday as the Sabbath?
Not sure on that one. Not sure. I'm reading a lot about.
I think they do, and that difference in opinion That could cause some conflict, I guess.
Well, see what I mentioned before, and I'll just go back to my notes about the when I was talking about Shabbat. That happens each week from sunset on Friday to sunset on Saturday. They're not allowed to do anything. So I gather from that would mean that see, because God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. So they're not allowed to do anything to sunset on Friday to sunset on Saturday. So Sunday then would be the day, I guess, where everything's back to normal. To take up your point, so
Unless, of course, they start the week on a Sunday, in which case Saturday would be the seventh day and the rest day.
yes, it's confusing because Sunday is not working on the Sabbath, but it doesn't kind of fit in with this. So again, I don't know what Luke knows about Judaism per se, but I'm sure he knows a hell of a lot more about it than
Do you
me.
find that's another interesting thing, Pete? When you talk about religion, you can refer to Hindus and you can refer to Christians and you can refer to Muslims. But as soon as you use the word Jew, it almost sounds like you're trying to insult someone or
Yes.
be discriminatory. And
Yep,
yet it's the correct term for describing a person of the Judaistic faith.
Yes, I actually asked my wife today. I said, "Look, I'm just writing out this intro, and I'm saying Jew has a sound." I said, "Should I say Jewish people? That sounds so much nicer than Jew." And I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree completely. And I'm
There's
not
some
sure.
emotional baggage attached to it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That word has been used in so many horrible contexts throughout history that I'm reluctant to even kind of talk about it because the
Yep.
connotations.
But it's similar. I mean, lots of words change their meanings and their level of offensiveness over time. I mean, a good example is, originally back in the UK, people that came from Pakistan were referred to as Pakis, and it was just a nickname. It meant nothing insulting. But these days, to call someone a Paki is an
Oh my God,
actual
yes,
insult. And
yeah,
it's the same with, very much. We've actually had a case go to court back in the days when I was at 6PR, and Suresh would know a little bit about this. Someone referred to someone else as a POM on air, and someone took
I remember
offense at
that.
that.
I remember
And,
that.
I mean, words are just words ultimately, but you got to be concerned when words like Jew take on an alternate meaning, Paki.
Yes,
And I'll give
yeah,
you another difficult one. And this is one where I lived in Port Hedland for a number of years. And
no,
obviously, your Aboriginals up there were referred to over the years in many different ways. Today,
yeah,
I understand that the correct term is blackfella,
yeah,
and that's what they call themselves, and that's what we've been told to refer to them as. But
yeah,
back then, sometimes you would use the word abo. Now, these days, that is also
yeah,
a swear word, right? That's an
yes,
insulting
yeah,
term, and yet
absolutely,
it's just another way of describing a group of people. And
yeah.
that brings me back to the term Jew. Is that still a safe word to use these days?
Oh, depending on the context, yeah, I think so. I mean, you are a Jew, you are Jewish. Um, I guess a part of the difficulty might come is that, of course, everyone assumes automatically that Jews are religious. Now, there are Jewish people who have converted to Christianity, to all sorts of becoming Muslims. That you are born a Jew, you are definitely a part of the chosen people according to the
That's a
Bible.
good point, Pete. So you can't convert to Judaism, can you?
No, you are a Jew on your mother's side. You cannot be a Jew on your father's side. If I'm correct, listeners, please
So you have to
please
be a
correct me on that. But
descendant of the 12 tribes.
yes, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so it's a because I mean, look, let's face it, Hitler didn't leave us with a very good impression of that word until we really understood what had happened, and
Mm.
they are the most oppressed people that I can think of. Honestly,
Well, I'm going to say
it's
something controversial in that case, Pete.
okay.
If they're a group of people who have been oppressed and have been subject to a form of genocide in World War II, what on earth are they doing today to the Muslims in Palestine? What's going on there?
Yeah,
there's got to be a balance, Pete. At the end of the
yeah,
day, I'm not saying any side is correct. What I'm saying is stop killing each other, because that
yeah.
both of your religions don't allow you to kill each other. So stop
No,
killing each other.
yeah. Yeah, I don't want to go too deeply into that, but it's really hard from where we are trying to get a handle on who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, because at the moment
There
everyone
isn't.
seems like the bad guy, and it's
There's no
yeah.
good
Look,
guy
just
and
got a
bad guy.
couple. Hey,
There's no good guy and bad guy in that situation. There's just two groups of people that are misbehaving.
yeah. Well, three really, if you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful. It's just awful. A couple of comments in from Greg getting off early. Don't they specify animals with cloven hooves? Yes, they do. I.e., pigs. I
Oh,
think
look what
that's
the
what
cat
Greg.
dragged in.
Yay!
Gentlemen,
And all these rules are the constructs of men, not of God. 100% correct. Absolutely. I mean, and good timing for Luke to come in on that, talking about the constructs of men regarding all of the rules inflicted on people. And we're talking about rules in general. We've talked about. Did you read my intro and stuff? And that's to get a bit of a handle on what we're talking about. Cool.
I did. In my mind, I read it in your voice as well. So it was. I felt like
Did you?
I did.
What did
Yeah,
what did I sound like?
your delivery was second to none, mate. It was actually
Impeccable.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Because you were reading it yourself, but in my voice.
Yeah, I fixed up some of the timing. It was sort of like you crossed with Morgan Freeman. There was an element. Yeah, it was, but
But was
not
it
much
was it a
Morgan.
retail read?
little bit, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So getting back to Greg's comments, all the rules he's talking about. You read it, so you know what we're talking about. Some of the rules, particularly Christianity, and also we're talking about Judaism. Actually, before I go on to expand on what Greg's talking about, Jace had a question which I tried to answer, and I don't know whether I did or not. And I thought you might know. How's your history on Judaism? Any good up there? Or
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean,
Well-
I'm sort of by no means an expert, but yeah, studied it.
okay, so what was your question, Jace? I can't remember now.
Me neither.
I did hear. Was it about converting to Judaism? I think I heard
Well,
something.
no, that was one of them. I actually think that the main question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, but my biggest query that's still in my mind is we these days say that we pretty much discount the Old Testament because it's a New Testament God. Okay,
Yep.
So Christians pretty much follow the New Testament now, but the Ten Commandments was an Old Testament thing. Does
That's
that mean
right.
that we discount the Ten Commandments as well?
Well, I mean, there's elements of it that probably. I mean, well, the premise there is probably wrong to begin with, because we shouldn't be discounting the Old Testament. Some do, certainly some do, but I think the sections that do, or that I guess quite a harmful thing that came out around this whole idea between the New and the Old Testament is called supersessionism, which is effectively this movement of saying the Old Testament is totally irrelevant. It's been superseded by the New Testament, discounting thousands of years of Judaism and history, and totally ignoring the fact that Jesus was Jewish. He practiced Judaism. His Bible, his text, the scriptures that he loved and was the Old Testament. It is
I'm so
not
glad you brought that up, Luke, because there's so many Christians that either discount or completely ignore the fact that Christ was Jewish, and not just any old Jewish, but like a real part of a really conservative sect of Judaism as well.
100%. And he went to temple and he observed he was a radical and a revolutionary, and he his teachings sort of turned some of it on its head, but it never it wasn't damaging, it wasn't disparaging, it was actually enlightening. It was so yeah, it's a really poor position to take because it leads you to all sorts of problems like that. Do we get rid of the 10 Commandments? And the 10 Commandments is something that I'm sure we'll speak about if we're talking about rules and things, but it's a great example of something that was for a culture at a certain time, was incredibly progressive, and I can go into it in a little bit, but it's not like this was the masterwork of God's rules, because if it is, we're in trouble. I'd be pretty upset about that, because I would take out keep the Sabbath holy, and I'd probably put in don't own slaves.
Right. Yes.
And I might take out make no idols of me and put in, don't
Don't be a dick.
don't treat women. There is equality in human. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so much more. Don't.
Luke,
the list is endless.
If Jesus was here today, as he was 2,000 years ago, how would he be accepted? What would he be like? Would he be
It's a great
considered
question.
a political terrorist with his views being so extreme compared to the dominant culture of the time?
Oh, 100%. I think he would be, well, I think there'd be a lot of churches he wouldn't be allowed to preach at, put it that way, because he wouldn't be hanging out with the right people, and he wouldn't be towing the line with, I guess, LGBTQ people or doctrine or this and that we have so figured out. And Jesus would come in, I think, and he would totally upend that. I think Jesus would probably disrupt both the left and the right. There would be elements from the far left that would be saying, stop bringing God into this, stop spiritualizing this. It's actually all about the action on the ground. And then the far right would certainly be saying, you're a social justice warrior, you're woke. Jesus would be considered woke. Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah. And
so you think about that for a moment and you go, well, hang on. If Jesus was a social justice warrior, if he was woke, why is it that so many right-wing conservatives have such an issue with social justice warriors and the woke?
Their interpretation of the text and hundreds of years of a politicized reading of the gospel. We all know, all three of us know, you can get what you want out of the Bible. You want to support slavery, you'll find it. You want to support a violent, angry God, you'll find it, and vice versa. It's very easy to mold your interpretation of the text and who you think God is to suit our agenda, even if it's subtle, and even if it starts out as maybe genuine. Political power in itself, hierarchy, all of that stuff it's a pretty alluring thing to humanity in a horrible way.
So bringing it back around to this whole conversation around the rules that Christians and Muslims and the Jews have to follow, I look at, for example, the Catholic Church, and I think about how many rules that they've got that are not based on biblical teachings. So, a lot of the stuff, the very fact that there's a pope, the very fact that we've got this entire hierarchy of clergy, none of which is discussed in the Bible, but there's a whole bunch of rules around it.
Totally.
That to me strikes me as being not just disingenuous, but also offensive to the idea of the teachings of Christ.
I agree wholeheartedly. You see it in the Catholic Church. You also see it in certainly in fundamentalist churches, in quite a lot of different spaces. You'll see that. It's a tough one, right, with this, because there's two sides. So on the one hand, we can't relegate all of how we should live based on the Bible, because it's an ancient text. It has wisdom in it. It has stuff that we should be able to extrapolate and think, well, what does loving my neighbor look like today? I don't need that spelled out in a law for me to then apply that. I think that's how God wants to operate. But we can't just say, well, everything that God wants us to know is contained just in these books, right? But in saying that, we also can't then start chucking on a whole bunch of different laws or different rules It's fine if you say this is our interpretation and we think this is the best way to honor God. It's a whole nother thing if you say this is what God wants you to do. This is how God, this is what God said, this is what God thinks, this is if you want to keep in God's good graces, you must do this, right? Because we shouldn't be doing that either. Yeah, that's where we get these problems.
If you look at the Islamic faith and the Jewish faith, the fact that the books that they base their religion on is not the entire basis of their religion. In fact, the vast majority of religious law, religious canon in both of those religions today is based upon the teachings and the writings of clerics and the clergy over the last 2,000 years. And that applies to both the Muslim faith and the Jewish faith. So a lot of it
in Judaism
not necessarily a part of the actual literature. It's the decisions and the writings of scholars in the interim.
100%. In Judaism, you have the Mishnah and the Talmud, and they are effectively very, very early commentaries on the law.
Yes.
So because you have this one obscure thing written in Leviticus that says, don't roast your goat or something in milk or whatever it is, right? And then you have thousands of years of people going, well, what does that mean? What kind of milk? What kind of goat? How old? And so you have all of this. Then they have these writings of the early fathers of their faith or whatever that would give an explanation or a commentary, and often they would contradict, and often they were really wild. But it's. I'm not opposed to that. I think for a faith to be dynamic, I mean, you can't ignore thousands of years of tradition. Some of it, maybe you should. The Crusades, part of our history. I wish we could scrap it. I wish it never happened. There is nothing.
It's very much like the American Constitution, isn't it? You've got the Constitution, and then you have all these amendments that come along afterwards. It's kind of, this is the Bible, and we've now got amendments at the end of it because things have changed over time.
Prime example, and it works in a similar fashion. If we think of that Second Amendment, right, about the right to bear arms, which is held up by obviously the far right, but a lot in America and Christian nationalists, all this sort of stuff. And you go, well, we've got to take it as it is. Do we? Did they have any understandings of the types of weaponry that we would have today when that amendment?
But Luke, it's an amendment. It's not the Constitution. It's an amendment. And that means if you have an amendment, you can amend the amendment.
100%. Exactly right. But if it doesn't suit your agenda, that then becomes locked in place. Other stuff is free to change. And the Bible is treated the same way. Oh, this obscure contextual line about how to treat women, a woman being subservient to a man. You can't change that. That is, we'll lock that in because that suits sort of how we're living at the moment. But this over here, non-violence, I don't know, loving your enemy, that's all well and good. But like if your enemy's done this, or if we actually, there's a whole war, there's this and that, we'll adjust for that. But then it's just whatever we're suiting.
Pete, is that one of the rules that you're thinking about, for example, within the Christian church for a very long time, how women were not allowed to be ministers or priests?
Do you mean did I accept it or agree with it at the time?
No, I mean the fact that is clearly one of the rules that existed, and things have changed over time. There are still some elements of the church or some branches of the church that still won't have women in ordained positions. But is that something that, I mean, just like LGBTQI, over time, the church's position has to change or they just become completely irrelevant to modern society.
For me, I think it's very difficult to judge on what is true in the sense that you can read what is written, but you don't want to question it too much because you are surrounded by the reality of male domination in every area. So it's just completely normal. I just accepted it going, well, of course, there's a whole bunch of men up. And it wasn't until 20 years later that a woman pastor got up and we went, is this okay? Is this serious? And we kind of knew that it was okay. And then it became sort of something that the Anglicans pushed a little bit and then the Catholics got on board. But at the time, it was just everything was just male. So I didn't question it until I got to realize just how incredibly sexist, unfair, unrealistic, cutting out a group of intelligent, amazing people who have got as much to contribute to the growth of humanity than anyone. There is no
But Pete, if that's what the Bible
rule.
says,
And yet
Yeah,
the Bible also says in all four Gospels that the very first people to witness the resurrection and then to go and tell it to the others, the very first message ever preached, the very first time the resurrection was ever preached in all four Gospels, it was women. And then we've somehow landed in a space where we go, well, the Bible says that women can't preach. Are you kidding me? It's like, it is, again, we'll take bits and pieces and we go, yeah, this kind of fits. It's a lesson that we can't just treat this text as a rule book. The Bible can't be treated as a rule book because you'll either end up with a really, really harmful interpretation that just suits what you want in an organization or as an individual, or you'll end up just confused. Like you got to pick. Yeah,
well, I tell you what,
even
one of the bigger churches in WA would be quite upset if you said that women couldn't preach. Margaret Court's church. I mean, she's leading that church, and there's a lot of very staunch believers there, but they still accept Margaret as being their high priestess.
And I think that's a choice of convenience to a degree, where if you're going to oppress any group of people, in this case women, for a long period of time, because they are such amazing humans as we all are, it's only a matter of time before they push back and just go, you know what, that scripture, that thing, no, that's not what they meant. Put it away. We're doing this. We're going for it. And there will always be a group of people who accept that and go along for the ride. There will always be a whole bunch of other people who will never change and never see it because they want to pick out parts of the Bible because somehow it celebrates their hate or prejudice or bias or bigotry, so
100%.
yeah. I just want to mention Fenton's joined us as well, who's a fabulous supporter of what we're doing. Fenton, hey again, mate. Great to have you on board. Fabulous. Let's hear your opinion about the rules and laws. You have been a man of faith before, so you should have some interesting comments. And Greg, although he wouldn't be able to prove he was Jesus if he came back because he wouldn't have 100 points of ID. That's fair enough. Fair enough. Look, and
do a miracle, and everybody would believe it.
In answer to what you said before, Jason, it would be very interesting if Jesus suddenly appeared here and now, because I can guarantee you that half of the people would want to hang him up as a heretic, claiming that unless he could prove somehow that he'd be locked away in a padded cell because he'd be a nut, and there'd be a whole bunch.
Both of you. If Jesus appeared today, would he be a vegan?
Pescatarian. He had fishes and loaves.
Oh, because that's not meat, is it?
I don't know if it was gluten-free loaf, by the way, but
mushrooms. You'd be all about the mushrooms.
I think if he appeared, he'd take one look at what we've done and just run for the hills and find a cave to go and live in.
Seriously, if you think about it, today, with all of the culinary choices that we've got, if Jesus, and keeping in mind that, and Luke, you'd be able to quote the scripture, I'm sure, keeping in mind that everything on earth was placed here for the use of us humans, every fruiting bush and every animal is here for us. Does that mean that Jesus would be quite happy to kill an animal to eat it?
I'm not sure that the animals are there for us to do what we like. We were given dominion over them in a sense to look after and protect them and utilize the fact that they help us. I'm not sure you'll find any scripture that says that the animals are there for us to do as we please. So, but certainly I would imagine he ate meat. I mean, I would imagine everyone back then ate meat. There was very little choice. I mean, there wasn't a hell of a lot of veggies around, as it were, back then. So I think that would have been the basic food of meat. So he probably would. And what a bizarre question, but thank you.
Well, no, as time progresses, and we've said that culture changes over time, I don't know whether this will happen or not, but I foresee a time in the future where we don't necessarily eat animals. I mean, I'm a huge meat eater.
Absolutely.
I love my burgers and I love my steaks. But if we do head that way as a culture, I wonder if that's something that the church will then begin to support as well. Will vegetarianism and veganism become a part of religious teachings?
Well, when you look at the Bible, actually,
Mm.
they didn't eat meat until it all went pear-shaped. So
Oh,
I guess
really?
what you would consider the fall, which is a myth, the story designed to illuminate a greater truth. But prior to that, there's no mention of eating animals. It's only sort of after that. In fact, I think it's only after the flood when the use of agriculture and sort of farming animals for human consumption, all that sort of stuff starts to, it's a different story before that. It's subtle, but it's there. Look, I think at the end of the day, really that call for dominion is to bring creation to its fullest potential, and certainly to do the opposite of exploit, which is the opposite of exploiting it. We do a pretty good job of exploiting the environment and the animals that we eat.
So, Pete, you'd be aware that I am a very, very strong advocate for the use of cannabis in a legal sense.
Mm-hmm.
I am someone who has been prescribed cannabis for my multiple sclerosis, and it's the single most effective medicine I've ever taken in my entire life. It's been incredible. It's allowed me to get off 7 other different daily medications. So I look at cannabis as being a very powerful plant that has the ability to be abused, but much like alcohol can be abused. And yet, in my advocacy, I've gone and given lectures about it to medical people and all sorts of different types of people. I've had 2 distinct reactions from the Christian world. One of which is, God put it here for us to use, and we should make use of it. If it makes us feel better, makes us get better, then absolutely, it is a divine product. Versus the Christians who go, any form of drug that you're taking into your system is completely against Scripture.
Whilst they drink coffee.
Yeah. If I have any idea about the character of Jesus, acknowledging that I believe he was a historical person, C.S. Lewis said, yes, he believes he was a real person. He's not convinced that he was God, and nor am I. But based upon the character we know, I have no doubt that he would actually take you in his arms and say, whatever we can do to make you better, my son, regardless of whether it comes from the moon or whether it comes from the testicles of a low-flying bat or wherever it comes from. He would not be. That is not. And this is what always stuns me about the whole discussion about Jesus, that if everyone on earth tried to be like Jesus, we wouldn't have the problems that we had. Just as a model, you could say the same for Buddha, you could say the same for Confucius, you could say the same for 1,000,001 characters in our history. No, not at all. It's about
the guy.
Yeah.
So
well, that's what
be
Jesus
having the bumper sticker on our car that just says WWJD. What would Jesus do?
Yeah. I mean, if you look back at what he did, healing the sick because he could, loving people because he could, embracing people because he could, going against the hierarchy because he could. He did all of those things, and
Pete, I've just realised. You know, we were talking about eating fish.
Yeah.
Luke, when Jesus fed the masses, did he not create loaves and fishes and hand them out?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
So fishes are okay.
Yeah.
For what?
I think Jesus probably cares more about thousands of starving families, feeding them than the I guess the fish. They're poor, horrible. But in saying that, they appeared, right? So it's not like he didn't have to catch them. It was like, I'll just create some. Interesting in that, though, in all of the accounts of that, it never says that Jesus does that miracle. It's the disciples that do it. He just kind of lets them do it. So I think it was a miracle, but Ched Myers does an amazing breakdown of it in the view that it wasn't a miracle, but the actual miracle was in the sharing of resources that he inspired in that moment for all to share with each other, and as a model for basically what humanity could look like if we actually did share our resources, so that no one had too much, but everyone had enough. I love
the way
that.
you think, Luke.
I love that.
I like talking to a rational Christian.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, make use of him, because you won't find too many of them around. Greg, my brother Greg, I was waiting for this to come through. If we stop eating meat, we will all die out. Meat has been an ancestral food for thousands of years. It is our natural diet. Greg, I am not, for one, going to get into this discussion with you. Period. If these guys want to make comments about it, hey?
Do you know what they're called?
Yeah, they're called molars.
No, they're called canines.
Oh, canines.
Yes,
those sharp ones, they're canines. Do you know why? Yeah. Because we evolved to tear at meat.
Thank you, Dr. whatever your last name is, Jordan.
Darwin.
Look, it is a debate that has been going on for eons. There are so many different opinions. I refuse to accept that there's necessarily a right one. I don't believe we are necessarily designed to just eat meat at all. And there are extreme examples of that. Only eating meat with the belief that vegetables will kill you is just, and I know, yeah, there you go. There's the response, Luke. You just laugh. That's what my brother believes. So there you go. So anyway, I'm not going to get into that. It's not the right forum for it. It's a philosophical debate, which is not what we're talking about today.
I do think if Jesus did come back and he was hit with this question, so what do you reckon? Like, are we allowed to kill animals to eat them, or are we not? He'd probably say, let's just table that for a little bit. Let's work on stopping killing other humans. Let's work on the war thing, and once we get that in hand, then we'll talk about the food situation, right?
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it.
Is the Muslim God and the Jewish God and the Christian God all the same God?
Well, yeah, they're from the same teachings, yeah.
Who knows?
I understand the prophets are different, Muhammad and Jesus and so on, but it's all the same God, yeah?
Well, Middle Eastern Christians call God Allah because it's just God in the language.
And if you look at the parallel between the Quran and the Bible about what you can and can't do, there is many parallels about
similarities.
The rule book.
So we're really arguing
book
over the prophets more than anything else, aren't we? But which is sort of modern society in general, really. But if we're doing that, Luke, when you weren't here, Pete and I very briefly touched on the very controversial subject of what's happening in Israel and Palestine.
Yep.
And we're just saying, not necessarily any good guys and bad guys in this, just a bunch of people misbehaving who all answer to the same God and really should stop just killing each other.
100%. There's all sorts there. I think look, if you want to, for me, I can only speak personally. I think for me, if I look at, if we have to take sides, who is the weaker opponent being oppressed by the bigger one, and I look at what the power of the state of Israel and what that's happening there to the people of Palestine, and clearly I say that's horrendous, because not all Palestinians are Hamas, and even how Hamas was born out was from a situation that had been put on them that clearly terrorist activity and horrible, but we have to look at the bigger picture of what's creating these environments, and so I look at that. But clearly that doesn't condone any retaliation from, Palestinian terrorists or that sort of stuff. So the reason I say that is because I don't like, it's a safe Western thing for me to do, to say, well, there's good and bad on both sides, and I kind of want to stay out of it. I think I need to pick a side in the interest of justice. But with acknowledging there's grey area, it's nuance. It's not black and white. These things never are. But you also have to call out when there is serious oppression happening. And I think
it's actually the definition of a war crime when you have a disproportionate response.
And there's several Geneva Conventions that State of Israel have contravened. I'm sure. It's a whole other thing. But yeah, I'm very, very adamant with that's sort of where I sit with it. But if you bring it back to God, absolutely, both of them, neither of them are correct. It's like, what are we doing?
Which is the amazing irony, of course, because that's the origins and the roots and the foundations of the ongoing war, which we can debate and argue, and people can say whatever they like. This I don't think this will ever end. As long as you have egotistical, stupid men in control of things like this, I just love these leaders who never get their hands dirty. Kids and women and men just murdered and killed and whatever, and they sit in
Sending other
their
people's kids off to war.
ivory towers, just
100%.
ticking the box, do this, do that, and nothing ever happens to them, and they are just stupid.
But you know what, Pete?
Ignorant,
You can't just say it's men. Look at Margaret Thatcher. The women can be just as bloodthirsty.
No, I'm talking about men in this particular instance, the leaders in Palestine and Israel, and I don't think there's too many women involved. And if there is, maybe they can't make any changes because the men have already put this in place a hell of a long time ago. It is just
There are a few female hawks in Israel. Oh yeah,
the name for this is empire. It's a great understanding, and we tend to look back on empires as these great things. Look at the great empire of Rome and of this and that, and you go, yeah, cool. There's an element of that where we go, that's amazing what happened and all this, and that's interesting. But then when you actually break down what empire is, it's horrific. It's the worst invention that humanity ever created,
and it's awful. I mean, let's get back to this whole thing around
the Roman
rules.
Empire.
So you take a look at what
at the top at the expense of the mass, at the expense of the bulk. Yeah, it's horrible.
If you take a look at what Muslims want in every country that they go to, where they start setting up their own communities, they want to implement Sharia, and in the UK now they actually have a Muslim arbitration board to actually parallel the British justice system for those Muslim communities. Now, you might argue that is one law for one group and one law for another. But they've got their own form of justice, much like Aboriginals do here in Australia, with their own tribal law. And do we respect that? When you've got what are effectively religious laws, religious rules, do we respect that over and above the secular laws that we have in place as a country?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. It's a tricky one. I have heard it poised many times, and I'm really not sure what the answer is. If there is an answer that's going to suit anyone, the answer to that is no. I don't think it will. There has to be compromise to a degree. But Sharia law, I mean, yeah. Well, I'm going to hand pass that over to Luke.
It's really hard because I think using the example of the Aboriginal communities, tribal law. In these rural communities, if you were to come in and remove that and try to impose something separate, it causes harm and disharmony, and it widens the gap, but from a reconciliation perspective, all that sort of stuff. But then we also have to look at, and I'm not an expert on that, but you'd have to look at that and say, well, if there is a significant conflict between one aspect of that law and the aspect of Commonwealth law, for example, being, this one says, well, you can murder someone and you're just going to get a bit of a slap on the wrist. This one says you go to jail. Well, you kind of have to impose that. There's got to be a limit. So thankfully there are smarter people than me who deal with how to implement that. I don't think it's been done well anyway, but I think the other important element is for any of these, whether it's Sharia law, whether it's tribal law, and the Jewish people, like in their history, this was kind of the model. They had successive empires all through the Old Testament take over them: Persians, Greeks, Babylonians, Romans, and in each of those, the system that kind of worked the best was they sort of left them to their own, and so they had their own Sanhedrin, their own council, and they did kind of administer their own justice. They were sort of left left alone, in very similar to what we're talking about. And you see that in the New Testament, that as well. But clearly there was a line that was crossed at some point where they would say, well, actually, no, if you do this. But the other key thing is you almost have to opt into that. You have to choose to participate in that. If you choose to become a part of that community, then you choose to kind of come under that law.
That's an interesting argument, though, because let's say you are an Aboriginal, you've committed a crime, you go before your elders and so on, and the punishment is you're going to be speared in the leg. Suddenly, you might decide that you no longer want to be a part of that community, and you would rather experience the secular justice system. So it's kind of like, when is that decision made? Where do you draw the line? And are we discriminating by either allowing them to have their own system, or by saying we're allowing them to actually inflict an injury on another person?
And I think that's exactly the nuance where you would have to look at that and say, this isn't acceptable, for example. And this is why I haven't thought enough of it through to go, well, okay, it's all well and good to say, let them have this thing, but it would be illegal for someone to administer that law, to spear someone in there. And I know that actually is one of the punishments. This stuff does happen. In the terms of someone who was about to be subject to that, I think they should have the right to be able to say, Barleys, I'm actually out. I'm going to go with this.
You can't do that with the secular system, can you? Because you go, can't. Oh, hang on, you're giving me a life sentence? No. Barleys, I don't want a bar of that. I'd rather be stabbed in the leg.
Yeah, I'm going the spear option. Yeah, so it can't be. It's really only a one-way thing. But if you were to do that, I would imagine then you are excommunicated from that community and you're disconnected from everyone. And so that's its own harsh repercussion as well. So it's an interesting position to be in. But the real question is, do you allow someone to stab someone in the leg? Is that the right thing to do? You can
draw the comparison to some of the US states where they've still got capital punishment. At what point can we actually say a government has the right to take someone's life?
Horrendous. And you'd think after one example of mistaken conviction resulting in murder, that it would be, this is not something we do anymore. And yet it happens every year. I'm a big opponent of the death penalty.
But what about in the case of, for example, the Bernies here in WA, where Catherine and David Burney admitted to doing those offences, admitted to killing people, torturing them, raping them, all that stuff, full admission. At that point, do we want to remove them from society?
You do. 100% you do. But I'd still be opposed to the death penalty, only because I can't pick and choose. This is why laws get amended, because laws were created to provide a framework for the idea of justice, which makes sense and is good until you start to try to apply that, and then you go, well, what about this case and this case, and and that's why we have massive books full of amendments and all sorts of stuff. For the Bernies in that case, absolutely remove them. They should be behind bars. For the rest, to remove them for the safety of the community, but not removed from this earth. That's I just don't think anyone should be killed.
I'm just wondering the connection between the death penalty and the origins of it, and whether most people that came up with the idea of death penalty in countries probably were deeply religious people who perhaps thought that death was the best option because they would go to spend eternity in hell as a punishment. Because I think the death penalty lets people off lightly. They're gone. They're out of it. There's no suffering. There's no chance to experience the true penalty of murdering someone. Hey,
what is the justice system? So, is our justice system about giving justice to the victim, whatever form that might take, or is it about separating an offender from society so they can't offend again, or is it about incarcerating someone so that you can potentially make them better so that they can go back into society. What are
Well-
we expecting from our justice system?
Well, it depends on what justice system you're talking about. And my wife Lou spent many years working for corrective services. We both worked in prisons and understand about the
The name itself is
idea.
a dead giveaway, Pete.
What's that?
Corrective services.
Yeah. Well, the idea is that people don't go to prison to be punished. Being in prison is the punishment. Separation from family, separation from all the things that you love. I think the rules and the parameters change a bit when you're talking about the people like the Bernies. I think you can sort of throw away the key to a degree. I don't think killing anyone is a satisfactory solution. I'm with Luke on that. I don't think that, but there's the argument of the cost of the justice. How much does it cost? What's his face? Mr. Bernie is dead. Catherine is still out at Bounty-up. She's been there forever, and she will be there forever. She will never be released, regardless of how many times she applies for parole. She will never get out of jail. What's that costing the innocent people of Western Australia?
But
An absolute fortune. But
is there a difference between someone who has admitted their guilt and someone who still professes their innocence?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I'm not sure, without spending a lot of time thinking about the what you're saying. Yeah, I'm not sure. What do you think? What is that a loaded question for a point, or do you not have an opinion on it?
Look, I think that like you, I think that killing someone. Look, it is a tough one, because if they are in fact innocent, then you've done absolutely the wrong thing. But if they're guilty beyond a doubt and they've admitted their guilt, and then you kill them, you're giving them the easy way out. I think that the existential torture of being incarcerated for an indefinite period is perhaps a form of justice for the victim. It's almost an eye for an eye in that regard, which I don't know is necessarily the right approach either. But there is a certain satisfaction in knowing that someone is being punished in an ongoing kind of way. But should we offer them the option of being able to take that cyanide pill if they want to?
No, because I think that could be very well be assumed to be the coward's solution to it. And I think as we go on and we evolve, some of us will leave and develop. The whole justice system we have in place may just be as archaic as we could imagine. It's a lot of it's biblical based, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth kind of thing. So that it has roots in that. It has roots in people thinking that if they're killed, they're going to go to hell, and being in prison is too easy, because they can be in a really nice prison and have a really good life. Maybe it's time to overhaul the whole thing and just say, look, what are we trying to achieve here? What is the right thing to do? Who is the person who's going to make the decision, and who is the person who's actually going to perform the execution?
Well, can I ask a really loaded question in that case? Both of you, and I want you both to answer this question
simultaneously.
Not
On
necessarily.
3.
Do you believe in democracy?
Define.
Yes.
The democratic process. Do you believe in?
Well, I mean,
people
the true, pure democratic process, or the twisted.
People going to vote,
not the party.
choose who they want in Parliament, to choose what they want to happen for the future of their country. So again, without cherry picking, if you believe in democracy, do you also then believe in the madness of the masses? So in other words, if the bulk of the population want capital punishment, should we have capital punishment?
No.
Well, I mean, that goes arm in arm with the democratic.
How do
vote,
we stop it?
Yeah.
How do we stop it? If that's the bulk of the population want, and they vote in the politicians to actually achieve that objective, how do we stop that from happening?
Well, because the people who believe in the democratic system have elected people to make those decisions for them. Therefore, they must hand over the reins, I would assume, at that point, to say we have set up the democratic system. You've shown us what you've got, your democracy. This you've laid it out. Yeah, love that. Go for it. Yeah, we vote for you. You make the decision. I don't think it's right that the powers would turn around and then say, okay, well, what do you think we should do? I think that the point of that is very different from having a referendum for gay marriage or other referendums that we've had about whether you want your curtains to fade because of daylight saving and stuff like that. I think you have to make that decision in the best interest of the people you represent.
But if the bulk of the population, this is like euthanasia, the voluntary assisted dying laws.
Yeah, but
now,
yes,
it's slightly different, okay.
But it's good. I like your point. I like your point because if that's something that should happen because it's right, then the people should have a say. So it's.
But who like?
Same with legalizing marijuana. If you can show that it's beneficial for people, then you have no right to stop it from happening. But that's not democracy in its true form, is it?
For example, though, with the marijuana one, right? So to decriminalize marijuana, for that to go to a vote, there would be a groundswell of support from society based on. Yeah, it's not coming from one location. It would be coming from multiple based on, oh, look, turns out this thing is incredible. It turns out actually this is really beneficial and helpful. And, there's a past that has colored it in a certain way that maybe isn't super accurate. And we need to reconsider this. And so all of a sudden now there's a bit of a groundswell. And that then leads to a point where it should be then put to everyone and then everyone can vote on it. The problem is when you have a few people at the top who are deciding what Australia is going to vote on, for example. So that's a deviation from the true democratic process because it's not originating from the people. It's originating from the top, and then the people are voting on it. So that's why, for example, I think the idea is you're not going to get a groundswell in support of the death penalty. You will have factions, but I think I could be wrong. But it's a hard one because if you've got someone, the reason that I say this, and I really love this question because it's got me stumped because I'm saying, I'm in for the democratic process. Then I'm saying, no, we shouldn't do that.
And that cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
It is cognitive dissonance, and that is a conflict of beliefs. And I love that because I'm going to wrestle with this. But this is just my initial thoughts on it is, if someone at the top is saying, well, here's the thing that we're going to vote on, then there's already it's already kind of been, what's the word? Affected. Do you know what I mean? That process, because it's been determined already. Plus then you've got social media and algorithms and all this sort of stuff. So people's decisions, we see this with the fact that Trump is even running again, the fact that he got voted in the first time, all this sort of stuff goes that people will make decisions, and it's true to the democratic process, but there is not the right decision. But you can't pick and choose, right? Because you need to. I get that, but
look at the election process, right? I don't know how it happens every single time. But we end up with close enough to 48% of the people who are on the left, 48% are on the right, and there's that 4% in the middle who flip-flop.
Yeah.
How on earth is it that we have a society that is so evenly split down the middle like that? And what would it mean if we went to a referendum with a simple question, one question? Do you support the death penalty for people who deserve it?
I think you need to back
the population would do.
I think you need to back up and make it one person, one vote before you say that, because it appears to be even, but it's not, because it's always 2 against 1. So if you strip it back and go 1 against 1, Labor wins every time. So there's not
Correct.
that. So that in itself is a part of the democratic process, which is flawed. And I think there are so many flaws.
But I'm not talking about preferences here, Pete. I'm talking about a simple
But it's
referendum.
party on party. There's
One
the
vote,
National
one value.
Party and the Liberal Party against the Labor Party. I mean, it's two against
no.
one, isn't it? I mean,
I'm talking about a referendum, not a preferential voting system.
sorry. Okay.
Simple referendum. Simple question. Do you support the death penalty? Yes or no?
The problem is,
See, I don't think the question should be asked, because we've only got to look at Brexit, and we've only got to look at the Aboriginal vote that we did recently to show that
agree.
people should not be allowed to make decisions on the future of any country. People should not
believe in democracy.
Look at Brexit. They all turn around and go, "We didn't understand the question." Well, too late, mate. You've stuffed it up already.
But is it democracy or not?
No,
it's tough. I know. It hurts my brain.
and that's a good call. So maybe democracy in that form is not the best. That doesn't mean totalitarianism is the best. That doesn't mean that dictatorship is the best. But maybe it means that this is a good system, but there are flaws in it, like everything,
Of course,
and I think
because people are fallible, people are dishonest, people are corrupt. Democracy. So when you ask me questions, do you believe in democracy? My answer is I don't know, because I don't think I've ever seen it in its true form. All I've seen is a bastardization of something which, in principle, should work, but so should communism to a degree.
We can't have what the Greeks had because there's too many of us. So we have a representative democracy, which itself is entirely flawed because it's colored by factions and parties and lobbyists and all of that kind of stuff. It makes it really, really difficult. Even the messaging that comes from the media and the way that social media is filtered completely changes every perspective that we can possibly have.
Always.
Unless you are the sort of person who goes out and seeks many, many, many different forms of media to try and exclude the potential influence that each of those forms has, it's going to be very difficult for you to have a truly well-rounded view of any particular situation, which is colored again by your own culture and your own religious beliefs. The fact that we have a functioning society here in Australia with the democratic system, or the alleged democratic system that we've got, blows my mind, because I meet so many extremists on both sides. I'm so glad that they cancel each other out and we walk a fairly middle of the road kind of path. But what we have here in Australia is different to anything else in the world. Look at the United States. That is a broken system. The UK, it's a broken system.
Horrendous.
We have got it so good and we don't appreciate it.
No, I agree. Let me just jump in before we start to wrap up, guys, because I just want to put a final call out. Fenton did touch base at 8:38, and we haven't heard from you, mate. Is this not tickling your fancy, mate? Let's hear. What do you think about the rules and laws which we were talking about initially? We've kind of gone off it a little bit, but it's still very interesting. It's a great subject, and perhaps one for another time. But if you've got a comment or a question, please jump on. If you are listening live, let us know what you think, and we'll wrap it up around about, I don't know, 15 minutes, or although I think Luke might be just about out the door. He's got a lot to do. So, but anyway, look, let's just take it bit by bit. Can we just, before we head into that final stage, guys, I really want to go back and ask you about, and in particular, and I'm not picking on Orthodox Jewish people, because Orthodox Catholics, any orthodoxy is kind of, to me, like fundamentalism to me, in its sense that it seems to be taking things to the extreme. And certainly the rules and the laws about having to live in your house with 2 ovens. And you think about that, how that it would impact your life, just so you can't, because somewhere in the Old Testament it talks about mixing dairy products and meat. So you spend your entire life avoiding that. And I want to know what you guys think about that, and what purpose do you think people are abiding by those extremes, to the point where, I mean, we have friends down the road who've just got a little boy and his hair's really long. I'm wondering why. Well, it's because the mother is Jewish and they don't want to cut his hair. I'm thinking, wow, okay, that's a real hold on people. Not having to go, not criticize, doesn't impact on my life in the slightest. I'm just interesting from a humanity perspective about the things that we do and why do we do them. What is the point? Is it because we're worried about offending God if we cut our sideburns off, or we have, one
Well, clearly Luke doesn't care
one?
about that.
See, mate, you're going to hell because you're not allowed to trim your beard. You shouldn't even have a beard. There's your Old Testament, mate.
I'm going to hell
Mate, if you read it,
every third Friday.
clearly Exodus, Deuteronomy, Leviticus are not on your radar, mate, because you are screwed so bad. And just before we get into that, Benson has jumped on, got a busy day ahead, so I've been listening while I get ready. It's 6 a.m. in California. Wow. Oh, thanks, mate, for the effort. I really appreciate it. Nice to know you're listening.
Legend, Fenton.
It's both interacting. What's the plural of interaction? That is plural. Anyway, he's able to do both. He can interact with us and he can just listen for the hell of it because we all sound so incredibly amazing and intelligent. Anyway, so guys, what do you think about people who live their lives with the confines of their religiosity to the point where it just completely controls everything that they do? Could you do that if you believed it was right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if I believed it was, if I believed that was an act of worship or that was required, if that's what I believed, then I would do it, probably begrudgingly. But
okay, so you do it begrudgingly because you thought it was right, even though you didn't want to. That's interesting.
If I was taught that I had to, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure everyone that subscribes to one of the more legalistic type interpretations of faith, would do certain things begrudgingly. It sounds like a huge effort, like even resting on the Sabbath. It sounds easy and good, but the complications and the concerns around what constitutes work on that day cause a lot of issues. Not press. You get into an elevator and you can't press a button because that's work. So they have in Israel they have elevators that will automatically on Saturdays stop at every floor, so no one has to press the button.
So much.
That was the question.
So much of what we do today, we don't call it religious rules, but it is. I'll give you an example. So down here, I live very close to Albany. There's no trading on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is the whole. That is an echo of the previous not working on the Sabbath.
100%.
It's reserved for going to church. And very few people go to church, but that's why it's reserved. And there's
I did not know that.
Adhere to culturally that we think are just perfectly normal. We don't even think about them because it's a part of our day-to-day culture, and yet it is rooted in Western Christian ideology.
Yeah, well, and it was always that way when I was growing up. There was never anything open on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Thursday or whatever. But I would have thought that even in 2024, sorry,
driving to get to a rostered petrol station.
Oh my God, there was only ever 3 in Perth: one at the airport, one at the taxi depot in the city, and somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It was crazy, but. Mate, hang in there because eventually 2024 will get down to Albany and things will change. I promise you. Now,
it's open when the big ships come in. When we have a cruise liner come to town, everything's open.
I just remembered the question that we were talking about asking Luke on because I was reading out Luke about the what's it called again? I've forgotten the name of it. The Shabbat, the Jewish day of rest. And which starts on the Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. We were discussing what the Sabbath was according to Judaism. What is the Sabbath? I thought it was the Sunday.
No, it's traditionally the Saturday. In I guess Western Christianity, I guess at some point became the Sunday, but it's still Saturday in certain Christian denominations, but obviously in Judaism, it's always been Saturday and is still.
I was saying with Pete that a lot of calendars these days start on a Sunday. So if you think about it that way, Sunday through to Saturday makes Saturday the 7th day and the day of rest.
Yeah, right. But I was confused because from as I read out before, the from sunset on Friday to sunset on Saturday it's interesting that the Sabbath is incorporated with that Friday sunset as well. Not anyway, but that's okay. We got that cleared up. So
Yeah, I mean,
good.
That's a classic example of us, and humans do this, and particularly in religious frameworks, we'll do this. Take something that is a great gift, a great spiritual idea, that's actually wise, and we'll take that and then we'll codify it and we'll make it something that is actually bondage and restrictive, and we completely ruin it. The idea of it, the idea of Sabbath is beautiful. The idea that we are wired and designed for a rhythm of rest is great. We see, you look in Japan and their culture of overwork and and then they're just dying whilst they're typing an email, that sort of stuff, like because of this culture that we have. And it's certainly over here as well, of just constantly going and going and going. We never stop. We never rest. This idea of a continual rhythm of rest, because we need it, our souls need it, our bodies need it, our minds need it, our families need it, is awesome. And it also extended, there's a big agricultural history around it, because they would tend the land, and then there would be every 7 months. So it was not just a weekly thing, it was every 7 years, and then every 70 years. And it was like they would rest the land and they would move crops around, because again, land needs time to recover, for the nutrients to get back into the soil, all of this stuff. So there's this beautiful picture of like, what a great idea to build our lives around this rhythm of work and rest. And then we take that beautiful idea and we've turned it into the most, in some circumstances, this oppressive, like legalistic thing where you're not allowed to press a button in an elevator, or you can't swat a fly, or any of this stuff. And
well,
I mean,
you'd be a fan of the latest legislation that's coming through about the right to detach. This right not to be on call all the time with your work, for example. So people who now don't have to have their mobile with them all the time, don't have to answer their boss if he calls or emails at 9:30 at night. I mean, 100%. That gets more back to the sort of the biblical idea of actually having downtime.
Absolutely.
I remember growing up as a kid, Sunday you went to church, and Sunday was a very different day for all of those reasons. Nothing was open. You couldn't go shopping. You might be able to go to the local swimming pool, might be open if you had one. But that was it. It was completely different. And then, as Luke has so eloquently put it, I mean, this is where it became something completely different, and people started saying, "But why?" And look, understandably too, if it's religious based or biblical based, then there's every chance, of course, that people are going to go, "Well, I don't subscribe to that. What I need to do is go shopping on a Sunday or a Saturday or late on a Thursday night."
Does it really matter?
And so they go, "Well, let's do it."
As long as you have 2 days off a week, does it matter what days they fall on?
No, of course not.
Not anymore. No, I mean, it used to be set up, which is fairly stereotypical. I get that, and that has changed over time. Look,
because they're born out, these things, and this is one example of a lot of the laws, a lot of the rules. It's like we get hung up on the day that it is, but when it was first introduced, it was given a day because we need instruction. So this group of people at one certain point of time needed this spiritual principle or this idea of rest, and they said, and it was decided upon, by God, but likely by someone in that situation thinking that, and it would have been inspired by God, but this isn't God speaking down a mountain sort of thing. Doing this thing, going, well, look, every Saturday we're going to do this because we got a name, we've got to give it a day. We're gonna set up something, and then over time that then becomes, so then the Saturday becomes holy, and it's like, no, the Saturday isn't holy. This idea of rest is holy. It's like, but it just happened to be on a Saturday because Bob decided that Saturday's a good day to do it, and so there's so much of that, and we see that through all these things in the Bible, in the Old Testament in particular. So many of these laws, so many of these rules, even the 10 Commandments, they're given to a people coming out of Egypt. And it's like there's this whole beautiful thing in there. They sound archaic and boring and they were radically progressive at the time, That doesn't mean they're still radically progressive now. That doesn't mean they're the final story. Now we know more about it. So we build on that. But at the time, it's like, this is what these people needed. This is what they could handle. And it's locked in there. When we take that as static and we try and appropriate it today, that's when it becomes legalistic and it becomes about trying to tick a box. And Jesus upended this all the time, even with the Sabbath thing. There's a beautiful story of him feeding his disciples because they're starving, and so they're picking all the corn or whatever, the wheat off the field. And the Pharisees are ballistic about it because you can't do that on the Sabbath. You're not allowed to work. And Jesus is like, you've missed the whole point. Like, if they're hungry, we can do this. This is like, and he literally says, Sabbath is made for man. Man is not made for the Sabbath. And that you can apply to all of these things. It's designed.
Well, a question without notice. The 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Do you think it was just kind of convenient that it's 10, as in 10 fingers? Why wasn't there 9 commandments or 8 commandments or 11 commandments? Why is it? It just seems terribly convenient that it just happened to be 10. Nice round number.
Why is it convenient to match up with how many fingers we have?
Yeah.
We've also got 10
12
toes.
commandments?
Yeah.
8 commandments and 2 thumbs.
I mean, look, I think the impact on the impact on the commandments was the fact that somebody decided to put things into a form, into a list. That's what the power of the commandments were. The content is not secondary, but it's almost like, okay, you need to see this list, this official. I don't know why it's 10. I mean, do we even know that the thing even existed, or is it just a metaphor? I mean, I don't know. Did anyone
exactly? Yeah.
I mean, so someone made it up. 10 sounded good. Let's go.
In Indiana Jones, which is canon, there is the Ark of the Covenant. So we've proven that conclusively it existed.
Of course.
But basically, we look at those rules and we go, do not murder. Duh. Like, do we have to say that? Do we need to write that down? You could use that for one of the other better commandments. But then when you think about it and you go, this is a group of people who have just spent 480 years in slavery in Egyptian. What do you reckon the human life was worth to them then? You sneeze the wrong way. You look at someone the wrong way and you're murdered. Yeah. Human life meant nothing.
Of all of the rules that we could have in society, do you really think that of the 10 that we were going to supply, of the 10 that we were going to make an issue of, do not covet thy neighbor's wife is one of the most important ones? Really?
Funny you mentioned that, and I will touch on that, but just finish off what I was thinking. This value of human life means nothing. They come out of this, they're in the desert, and they're trying to work out how do they form this community, okay? And there's a story, and it's metaphor and all that sort of stuff in a lot of areas, but basically think of this story. Well, this commandment of do not murder is pretty massive. It's a thing that's saying, number one, God values each and every human life. Number two, just because you want something, you can't kill them and take it. So not only is that, we think of that as like something that is, oh, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Oh, that's pretty easy. I won't murder. I didn't feel like murdering anyway. That's okay. But it's not. It's more about, imagine the relief you would feel hearing that. So someone just can't murder me because they like my shoes or my whatever, or it's like I'm actually protected by that.
You're coming back from the other way. I like that. That's interesting.
It's like, imagine how you would feel after seeing what human life is worth, about not wanting to sneeze the wrong way for fear of being killed, and all of a sudden finding out I now live in a community. This community that we're building around God is actually, I'm protected. No one can just kill me for any reason, right? And clearly there was the law came and there was all sorts of stuff there, but that's the beautiful principle. I find that the covet my neighbor's wife one. It sounds ridiculous. And again, I think if you look at it from a bigger picture, it's not just that isolated thing. The beauty of that is, I think, when you are desiring something, and Rene Girard talks about this all the time with mimetic desire, and what that then leads to, this conflict of desires, it will never be enough. This sacred object of you're desiring something, if I just have that, it'll be okay. If I just have that, it'll be okay. That then becomes this thing in its own, but you're never happy. You're always seeking after it. So if you
phrase it that way, why not just say, don't wish for the things that you can't have?
probably because the way that it displayed the most prominently would be in desiring your neighbor's wife. But not only just desiring them, I don't think God really cares whether you're checking them out. It's like, oh yeah, I quite like my neighbor's wife. It's then what that leads to. We're talking about this tribal culture at that point in time. Well, again, if you desire something, you're going to take it, and you're the stronger one. And there's this thing like this. It then leads to absolute mimetic crisis within the community of desire gone wrong, leading to
basically
violence.
What you're saying is reflective sunglasses are an abomination.
Sure.
I reckon this neighbour must have been a pretty damn good looker. That's all I can say. Because wow, I mean,
maybe Moses' wife was really good looking, and he's going, and another one.
That's right. Yeah, stop looking at my wife.
What I find really interesting, though, Luke, talking about don't covet your neighbour's wife as well. This is at a time when, known to everyone, there was virgins being murdered, there was genocide, there was slavery, there was like, wow. And then they come out and say, don't covet the wife. I mean, what about just all of the other things that I've said was okay before? Let's change that, because that was really sucky, and let's come up with another top 10 hits and make it completely different. I mean, wow.
That's the problem, because people look at the 10 Commandments as God's like amazing declaration to humanity of like, here's the 10 ways like that you will live a good life. It's like, no, it's addressing a specific thing. Think of it of this is 10 rules for you guys to build a new community and not avoid tearing each other apart internally. So it's not addressing external stuff. It's not really addressing anything. It's not comprehensive, and it's certainly not exhaustive. Otherwise, that's horrific. It's literally saying, here are 10 things that you guys need to get your head around after coming out of 480 years of slavery to build a life together as a community that is not going to last 2 weeks and then.
But also knowing that it wasn't going to work.
What's
also
that?
knowing that it wasn't. Well, just because you make a commandment doesn't mean it's going to work, and it didn't work. And so everyone got killed, and down came the flood, and there you go. What a waste of time.
Well, this was post-flood, but it still didn't work. I mean, they still were all separated. They still ended up in captivity. They decided to get a king against God's better judgment. God said, you don't want a king. It's not going to work out well for you. They said, no, everyone else has kings. We want a king. So they got a king, and it all went pear-shaped. This is why I love it. It's archaic.
They needed a queen. They needed a queen.
There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah, but
see, when they had
judges, hadn't been born yet.
They had women judges. That was the cool thing.
I actually learned something just as a side issue the other day, which I found very interesting. One of the most earliest popes was actually a woman.
Oh.
Nice.
Yes, I can't remember her name, but it was a long, because I wanted to put something together about how the papal thing is all male. And then I went back and had a look at all the history of all of the popes, and there's a woman in there right back in the beginning. I went, okay, that's
but you do realise that the Pope 2 popes back's name was Carol.
As in Neil Sedaka's Carol?
No. In actual fact, so Pope John Paul, I think the third,
right?
His first name was Carol with a K.
Is that right? Okay. Well, thank you for that piece of useless information.
I love how useless information.
I love how they've gone. You can be a pope, but we've got a short list of names. Like, you can pick one of these. Like, it's just.
Yeah. Look, that's probably another entire show, but I don't want to upset all of our Catholic friends. I believe there's quite a few out there. So
I do. I've got a lot of respect.
Look, do you have any mates who have the names? Matthew, Mark, John.
Yeah.
You ever go out together drinking?
Matt,
Peter. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, Peter. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm only interested in the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John part of it.
Oh, why?
Yeah. Song. I like that. And then we've got to find a Paul who just comes later. He never makes it to the bar at the same time that we are all there. I like that. I'm going to put one together.
Yeah, you should. And when you go to a
Yeah.
restaurant, you can all sit on the same side of the table.
Yes, I like it. Get someone to paint it. You know what we should actually do? We should do a live session, all of us, the 5 of us, in a pub.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine that.
Look,
Like actually walking into a bar.
yes, there's a great little thing. I don't know if you've seen it. A guy, he's some sort of minister, I believe, sits down in a bar, or not at the bar, but in a pub with beers each. And the last one I saw was a flat earther. And so they sit down together and have a serious debate about, and it's fantastic. It's very respectful. And the question comes up, do you believe in such and such? And they push their beer over to, no, I don't believe it, or yes, I do believe it. And then they just talk about it. I don't know what it's called, but it is amazing. It's great viewing.
I have seen it. Yeah.
And it's done respectfully. The guy attempts to put up a really good argument to a religious man, I think he is, about why the earth is flat and I can prove it, and here we go. And it's very good. It's very good. Maybe we should.
Yeah.
You just get a flat earther just because that's an easy win.
So anyway, an atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into a bar, and the bartender says, "What is this? Some kind of joke?"
Boom, boom, and double boom. Before we wrap up, I just want a little bit of self-indulgence here. I don't know if I mentioned to you guys, I'm on the board of a radio station called Youth Jam, which is a Perth station, digital, aimed at 12 to 25-year-olds for kids who want to have a voice, who feel like they're not being heard. It's kind of a top 40 mix of music. It's fantastic. And I've been invited to be on the board, which I am now doing. And I spent a bit of time on there because they're having a radiothon con. It costs nothing to run this radio station. But if they don't get a certain amount of money by Friday, then there's a risk that they might have to close down. So it's called Youth Jam, as it sounds. Youth Jam. If you want to help donate, please do, because they are desperate. And I'm looking forward to being a board member. And if this money doesn't come in, I mean, $8,000 for a year to keep the things, because they've got to pay for royalties, they've got to pay ACMA and all the rest of it for playing music and stuff. So if you can help out, please do. It's called Youth Jam, and just jump on the website and you can donate, and that would be fabulous. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I should.
Our message from our sponsor.
Yeah.
This radio show is sponsored by Youth Jam.
Well, yeah, you should send through the details of how people can donate, and we'll post it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very much for kids, which I think is fabulous, to help them out and give them a voice, to get them on air. A lot of the announcers who started out as young kids have gone on to other commercial ventures in the media. So yeah. Anyway, I pinched a little bit of the time, but I can, so I did. Just want to help out. So rules and laws, we can't get away from them. The irony is, of course, that we have rules and laws in our society and in our worlds, and we have to abide by them, otherwise we get in trouble, which is a kind of an okay and acceptable thing to do. What I do find amazing, how people who spend their entire lives not only living by restrictive rules, but if God isn't real, then they've done it all for nothing. That's depressing. Imagine get to the end of your... Hey?
Different levels. Because remember, you're talking about these rules that the really religious people live by, but we culturally still live by a lot of those rules. They're just rooted in religion. We just don't realize it.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Have you started dinner early by any chance? Is it?
I'm eating chocolate now because I'm hungry.
Okay.
Just to get you through.
You don't need a reason or an excuse to eat chocolate. It just So guys, any things to wrap up what we've been talking about, and any comments about the restrictive rules and laws that we live by? One thing I did want to
think about all of it, Pete. as long as it doesn't interfere with anybody else and it makes them a better person or makes them happy, then
Yep.
knock yourself out.
Yep.
Yep.
No, agreed. I feel sorry for people who. I want to know what they think will happen if they don't do it. Okay,
Yeah,
you've got your two ovens, you forget, and you cross them over, and the milk gets mixed in with the meat. What happens? What do people sincerely think is going to happen to them? Do they really think God is looking down and is interested in that? And I find that kind of control. I find it sad, especially with the kids. You see, they don't have a choice. They're brought into this, and it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't. Freedom. I find the character of Jesus to someone who would initiate freedom for the right reasons. To be honest, not laws, not rules, not restrictions. Just
I think you're right. I think the only thing that I would add would be to say, I echo both of you with saying, we cannot impose our own stuff on other people. That's crossing a huge line. Even if you think it's right, even if you think it's this and that, that's when it becomes totally antithetical to what we're talking about. The whole problem with Christian nationalism, with people trying to institute Christian leaders to force that on everyone, that's the worst thing we could do. Is the opposite thing of what the whole idea is supposed to be anyway. And I think for people, it's not all sad. There are people that get a joy out of it, out of certain rhythms that aren't as oppressive. Obviously, when you take it to a legalistic, really oppressive type thing that does go almost fundamentalist with it, it becomes an issue, and there is harm there. But for people who practice that not as strict component, and it's sort of just providing them a bit of a framework, and they feel like that they're it's their way of honoring or worshiping God. Whether God genuinely does desire that or not is almost irrelevant. It helps them. And again, if they're applying these principles and they're getting what they're supposed to get out of it, like the Sabbath thing, then that's not a bad thing, unless it goes too far. The only other thing I would say is, for those who do adhere to that, it's be careful, because it's very easy to tick a box. And you see this in evangelical circles a lot as well, of ticking a box of like, cool, I do this, I do this, I do this. And these are the things that God wants me to do, these rules and regulations, and then totally miss the point of this other stuff. It's like, if I follow these rules, I'm going to be okay. But then also not realizing the spirit of something. Like, there are some rules that we need to break. There's non-violent civil disobedience. The civil rights movement was a non-violent civil disobedience, and thank God we did that. We need to understand the spirit and the heart of the God that you believe, that you follow, whoever that may be, and live out according to that. Rather than a dead letter, literalistic approach to ticking a box so that you secure your salvation, and miss the entire point of what those things were originally designed to do, because you've locked them away. So I think, that's the only thing that I would finish with. Think bigger, think about others. That's the easiest way to do it. The two ovens thing is, when we start to think others, we start to say,
takes a long time to come, though, Luke.
What's that?
It takes a long time for people to develop that. I know as a younger person, that wasn't in my thoughts. But as I've aged and become a little wiser, I've begun to realize how important other people are, and service to other people as well.
Yes. 100%. Not just service to your church's worship team, not just service running the fog machine on a Sunday. They're not bad things. That's fine. Do what you want to do, but service to actual humanity.
Absolutely.
And you only get there through a genuine wrestling, a genuine questioning, and genuine conversations like this with people who may not believe the same thing that you do, and actually asking the question and digging deep and having the courage to do that will lead you to a place beyond yourself. It's actually pretty safe to take the rule book of the Bible and go, yeah, I can meet all those, and then that means I'm going to be good.
But isn't it interesting how people who have thought these things through and who are considerate can sit at the same table, have all of the same behaviors motivated by something that is pretty much completely different?
100%. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or you can just do it.
Virtual high five, Luke.
Yes.
That was scary. I almost felt
It's the Holy Spirit.
And just remember, everyone, on closing tonight, if God is real, and so is Satan. So have a great sleep.
Oh,
Mate, you must have the biggest block of chocolate ever. Stop it. I'm jealous. Pass some through, will you? Can you do?
ooh.
Oh, yeah, your virtual screen is making an absolute. Oh, it's old gold.
Ooh. Glorious.
Okay. Look, it's actually 10 o'clock, guys. We've done very well. Time to wrap up. Thanks, Fenton, and thanks, Greg. Enjoy your dinner tomorrow of nothing but veggies.
We'll get that outro video queued up.
Mate, thank you so much, Luke. Appreciate it, mate. I know it's been a horrific day for you. We've got 3 more of these while Rich is away. If you want to transfer the technology over to one of us to give you a break, yeah, feel free to do so. I don't have any setup. Obviously, it's just you and Rich at the moment who've got that. So if you need a break, give us a hoy.
No, I'm good. I literally slid in here. No, didn't set up my mic, didn't set up my camera, so I'm coming at you raw. But it's a good community to do that with, you know.
Well, it sounds and looks okay, mate. It's all good, all good.
Yeah. I made
Fabulous.
sure.
So, love to Tash. Hope she gets better well and gets out of bed and feels human again.
Thanks. I'll pass it on.
No good. All right. Good on you, mate. Thanks very much, Luke. Appreciate it. Jace, Chocolate Man, thank you very much. So listen.
No problem. Before I go, can you see the little cars down there?
Yes, I can. I want to know what you've got.
Look at the little people.
Yeah, what are they? Leprechauns. What is? How is that? Where did you get that from? What is it? It's obviously a live view from somewhere.
I play the outro video.
Hey?
Do you want me to play the outro video?
Oh, why don't you both talk at the same time again?
I said, do you want me to cut off Jace with the outro video?
I don't know. Do I?
I'll play it and then end the stream, and then we can hear about the people.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, good idea. Yeah, good idea. Good idea. Thanks everyone for joining in. An atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into a bar. We'll do it again next Wednesday. We'll let you know what we're talking about. Thanks, guys. Thank you all. Bye-bye, world.